Thank you, Dr. Tourat. But when we think of India and even continents like Africa, and you've mentioned a lot the small farmer, and indeed the small farmer is at the nexus of this food security issue. But when we think of Brazil, Monsieur Carfantan, we think rather of large-scale industrial agriculture. Could you tell us your thoughts on where the solution is?
Well, I'm not sure Brazil is a solution for the whole world, but let me tell you some points about the experience we had in the last 40 years and the main challenges we are faced with nowadays. I think we had a success because, to sum up, we invested a lot in research. One of the most important points of the Brazilian experience is the fact that the government and many other organizations have maintained during the, let's say, 50 last years, a huge investment in fundamental research. I would mention agronomy, soil sciences, genetics, just to give the government priorities during the last 50 years. And this is something which is maintained on the last 2 decades, and in some ways reinforced by private, national or international investments. The second point I would mention is the fact that we had a huge investment in extension services, either from public organizations or from private institutions. The focus has been, during the last 40 years, to organize farmers. One of the most interesting experiences in Brazil, we sometimes think Brazil is a country with very big farms, very enormous structures, but we cannot forget that the whole South farm sector is based on small family farms organized in cooperatives. And just to give an example, in the state of Paraná, in the south of Brazil, we've got a research institution which is maintained by 50 cooperatives. It is called Codetec, and Codetec is one of the main producers in Brazil of genetically modified seeds, either soybeans, corn, or cotton nowadays. The third point I'd like to mention is the fact that it has been a long process, but we've got macroeconomic stability. During many years, many decades, farmers' income and farm markets in large sense have been destabilized by our historical and very well-known high inflation. We had, for instance, 20% inflation in 92, 94, and it stopped dramatically on 94 when we adopted the so-called Real Plan. And from that time on, we had a very small inflation rate. I'd like to mention also the fact that we invested a lot of resources, financial and human, in supply chain organizations, which is, I think, something very decisive if you are faced with the main challenge Brazil was faced with 40 years ago, that is to say, how to supply a country where the urban population is growing very fast. I should mention also the main challenges we are faced with nowadays. Brazil became what I could call a richer country during the last 40 years, and we are losing competitivity in the farm sector. Nowadays, for instance, if you take the production cost of soybean in the Mato Grosso state, we are the same production cost as in Iowa in the United States, that is to say $296 per ton, for instance. But we do not have the North American logistics. Logistics is one of the weakest points of the Brazilian agribusiness sector. Everything is okay since 2009. We've got very good prices on the world market, and Mato Grosso farmers are very happy. If there is some decline of those prices in the future, it will mean a huge decline of farmers' revenues because they have to cope with logistics costs, enormous logistics costs. And the most important challenge the farm sector is faced with in Brazil is how to reduce those logistic costs. What is a progress at the farm scale, what is a profitable at the farm scale, is lost between the farm and the port. A second challenge we are faced with is our macroeconomic conditions. As you probably know, the Brazilian currency is relatively strong, and this weakens the farm products' competitivity on the world market. And this is not something we have solution for, because Brazil is receiving a lot of investments from foreign countries, a lot of capital, because we are to become a huge oil producer. And this is something that weakens the farm sector competitivity. Another point I'd like to stress is the fact that Brazil has some problems, still some problems to access to different markets. We still have to face protectionism, not only on traditional markets like Europe or like North America, but we have to face protectionism from our own neighbors. The trade relations with Argentina are very difficult. Trade relations with China are still to be improved, and this is one of the main challenges Brazil is faced with as what regard I would say, trade policy. Well, but just to stress a very important point, the question of competitivity. The notion of economy of scale has become a very important point in the development process of our farm sector. Nowadays, if you do not own at least 800 hectares, you cannot have a profitable activity if you are a soybean producer in Brazil. That is to say that the economic situation creates a sort of a selection and concentration among farmers. Well, I could give more details afterwards, but